You are standing at 11,000 feet in the Uinta Mountains of northeastern Utah. Around you, hundreds of alpine lakes sit isolated in the thin summer air. No roads reach them. No horse trails lead to most. In 1956, Utah wildlife officials made a decision that would change those lakes forever. They loaded a small aircraft with 35,000 fingerling trout. Fingerlings, fish so small you could hold one in your palm. The plane flew low over the remote water. The fish poured out of the door and fell straight down into lakes that had never held a single fish before. Now, I want you to sit with this for a moment. Nobody asked what would happen next. For 70 years, almost nobody knew. I have spent my career studying how species move through alpine systems. My grandmother worked conservation land in Utah, watched the land change across her lifetime. What happened in those dropped lakes became a question I could not ignore. By the end of this chapter, you will understand why Utah did this, why they believed it would work, and you will see the exact mechanism that made a small fingerling survive a fall from the sky. The method was elegant, the thinking was sound. But here is where it gets interesting. For decades, biologists assumed those fish died or starved in those remote waters. They vanished without trace until sonar arrived, until modern surveys finally looked back at those lakes. And what they found changed everything we thought we knew about what those drops had done. Stay with me, because the fish did not disappear at all. They transformed into something the stocking planners never imagined. And those changes are still unfolding today. So, those 35,000 fish went into the water in 1956, and for 70 years, nobody really knew what became of them. For decades, the assumption was simple. They died on impact, or starved in days, or froze in their first winter. I have worked in these mountains for 20 years, and I heard the same story every time, gone without a trace. Here is what I want you to understand about those lakes before we go further. They sit at 11,000 feet in country where nothing comes easy. No roads, no trails, no human food chain. The water is cold. The light is thin. The soil at the lake bottom is nearly sterile. These lakes had been empty of fish for 10,000 years, since the glaciers retreated. That emptiness meant something crucial. No invertebrate prey base had ever built up. No mayflies, no dragonfly nymphs, no zooplankton in any real abundance. A fingerling trout dropped into that water faced an immediate question. What am I going to eat? Now, in the 1960s and 1970s, biologists would hike to these lakes, look at the water, catch nothing, and assume the mystery was solved. Death by starvation. Death by cold. Case closed. But in the 2000s, we got new tools. Tools I use myself now. Sonar can move through water and find a fish the size of your finger, even in dark depths. Electrofishing sends a current through the shallows and stuns every fish present, making them visible for a count. Environmental DNA, eDNA, is the game changer here. We take a water sample, extract the genetic material the fish shed, and I can tell you not just if a fish is present, but what species it is, even if I never see it. When UDWR began running these new surveys in the 2010s, they found something that changed everything. Fish were there, alive, after 50, sometimes 60 years. They were small, stunted, barely 6 inches long, living in nutrient deserts on almost nothing. The trout had not vanished. They had simply become invisible. This is where the story takes a turn into something nobody expected. Those hidden fish were not just persisting, they were transforming the lakes in ways that would alter native life forever. Now that we know those trout survived, the next question changes everything. What did they actually do to those lakes? You are standing at the edge of a crystal-clear alpine lake in 1950, before any fish were dropped. The water is thick with life you cannot see, zooplankton the size of a grain of sand, Daphnia by the million. These creatures have lived here for 10,000 years with no predator. No fish means no teeth. No teeth means they grew large and slow. In 1956, the plane arrives. Fingerlings hit the water. The predator is introduced. Within 5 years, I can show you what happened using nothing but a net. The large zooplankton vanish. 95% gone. Replaced by tiny, fast species that hide from trout teeth. When the grazers collapse, the algae bloom. Clear water turns green. Brook trout are aggressive hunters. They eat mayflies, caddisflies, stoneflies, everything that moves in the mud. The macroinvertebrates that took millennia to establish disappear in a single generation. Those insects emerge from the water as adults and feed birds, bats, the whole alpine food web. Cut the insects, you cut the wings off the mountains. Fairy shrimp, ancient crustaceans that survived ice ages in this lake, are gone now. The boreal toad laid eggs in these shallows for thousands of years with no interference. A trout fingerling eats the eggs. The tadpoles follow. The toads never return. I have measured boreal toad declines of 90% across the Uinta Range since 1956. The ecological bomb is not the fish themselves. It is the cascade they trigger. Remove one thread from a fabric woven over millennia, and everything unravels. These lakes were not barren before stocking. That was the lie we told ourselves. They were full of life, just not the kind an angler could catch. For 60 years, managers watched this destruction unfold without seeing it. The damage persists today in lakes where no trout were ever removed. But here is where the story turns. What happens when we actually reverse it? Now, with those populations mapped and their damage cataloged, here is where the reckoning actually begins. In 2024, Utah's wildlife managers faced a question they had dodged for 70 years. What do we do about the fish we dropped? And I want you to understand the bind they are in, because it is not simple. The lakes that held those trout are not empty wilderness anymore. They are part of people's lives. Outfitters run camps on the shores of high-altitude lakes stocked in 1956. Anglers fly in from across the country, expecting to catch the trout that have lived there for generations. Those fish generate real money for towns like Duchesne and Roosevelt that sit at the mountain's base. Now, remove those fish, and you anger the people whose livelihoods depend on them. But leave them, and you watch boreal toads vanish, and zooplankton collapse, and entire ecosystems erode. This is the part I promised you at the start, and here it is. The real cost of the 1956 drops was never the fish themselves. It was that we did not ask whether we should before we did it. And now, 70 years later, the only way to fix it is to choose. I have spent my career watching managers across the West make this choice, and it is not popular. Utah's teams are using rotenone and electrofishing in targeted lakes, removing non-native trout to let native cutthroat and boreal toads come back. Some of those lakes show recovery in as few as 2 to 3 years. The amphibian populations rebound. The mayflies return. The water clarity shifts. But it means emptying lakes that people love to fish. As of this year, Utah has acknowledged the scope of the problem exceeds what money or time can fix alone. Not every stocked lake will be treated. Managers are prioritizing by native species value and feasibility. Some recreational lakes will remain exactly as they are, a compromise born from the fact that ecological restoration and human economy cannot always both win. This is the reckoning, acknowledging what was lost, deciding what we can afford to restore, and living with what we cannot undo. The next time you stand at the edge of a mountain lake, I want you to ask one question. Was this lake always here, as it is now, or did someone's choice put it on a different path? Because once you see that question, you see it everywhere.